Hello everyone, and welcome to the remake of Panzer Dragoon, otherwise known as Panzer Dragoon Remake, because people are very creative with their names.
Well, it's actually just technically titled Panzer Dragoon, which,
Well, on the Switch shop, it's on the Switch page. Like when I load up the game, it says Panzer Dragoon Remake.
oh, does
But
it?
what? Yeah, it does. So
Interesting. The only
yeah.
other game that I know that's done that is Final Fantasy VII, ironically. But, yeah, I was thinking this was like Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake, where they're literally just Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. And the only reason that's not confusing in RE3's case is because they didn't attach Nemesis to the title.
One of my favorite out of context pictures ever is the picture from the general Resident Evil Wikipedia, where it says first entry Resident Evil and then second entry Resident Evil 2, and then they were like, wow, after over 20 years they finally got a sequel. So anyway, this is a Saturn game from 1995, 1994?
Something like that, yeah.
That got remade for modern consoles. It was timed exclusive for the Switch. I recorded this a couple days after the game originally came out. Since then, there has been a patch which has done a couple of things. They've adjusted the difficulty a little bit some. They added the old soundtrack, and I believe they changed the sound effects, so they're much crunchier now and more exciting. What they didn't improve is the loading times, which is the thing I would have liked them to improve, but whatever.
That's probably to do with the hardware, to be honest.
Yeah.
We'll probably see a more fast-loading version of this when it hits the other consoles.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I had never played Panzer Dragoon before on Saturn, because I didn't own a Saturn. Nobody really did. But
well, not over here.
This is one of the few games that I hear people really talk about. Like, there aren't really many games for the Saturn that people really mention, but the Panzer Dragoon games, all three of them, people generally talk about and speak fondly of, if they're not talking about how expensive they are, especially the RPG one, which is, I think, still like $300 at the time of this recording or something ridiculous.
Well, part of it is just that until this, none of them had ever really been re-released.
Well, in the West, games like that tend to be more successful in Japan, and the Sega Saturn as a whole was more successful in Japan. So,
but it's interesting though, because the Panzer Dragoon, at least the real shooters, I don't know much about the RPG, but the Panzer Dragoon rail shooters were very 3D. They were trying very hard to be 3D games to the point where they kind of look in between. They actually look very good for the Saturn. I'd say they're only a small step below Star Fox 64 in terms of graphics, which is pretty good considering the hardware.
Yeah, there was a lot of effort put into the visuals for the original Saturn game, and I know a lot of people had on some level, disappointments regarding this remake, because it doesn't look bad, but you can tell there wasn't as much effort to be cutting-edge technology, which I think was part of what endeared people to the original.
Well, timed Switch exclusive, it was never going to be that, so...
Yeah, but that kind of comes across visually and compared to the original.
Well, I mean, I would forgive people for expecting that if it was timed exclusive for the PS4 Pro with, boost mode compatibility or whatever the hell that does, but, it's the Switch. Even fucking Dragon Quest looks worse on the Switch. It's not the system for graphics, it's the system for, I want something semi-portable, so I'm going to put up with games looking slightly worse because of it.
But even in Switch standards, this game isn't super graphically great. It looks like a download title.
It looks like a 2010 Xbox 360 game, and that's being kind of generous, I would say. This cutscene here isn't graphically stunning by any sense. I think the levels look fine. We'll see when we go forward, but...
I'm just saying, there's a bit of a pattern of people looking at Switch games and saying that the graphics are bad. So, by now we should kind of be expecting that.
And in terms of performance, which I think is the most important thing for a game like this, because, I would rather have this game run smoothly and not look as great technically, as opposed to have pretty particle effects and whatnot. Shaders, I don't know what graphics words mean, but I'd rather have the game look a little bit worse but run smoothly, as opposed to look better but not run as well, especially in a fast-paced rail shooter, space shooter type game. Like, it's basically just, I don't know what the genre for Star Fox is, but if you've never played this before...
Is the FMV actually tanking the frame rate right now?
Yeah, the cutscenes tend to drop the frame rate more than the gameplay. I've never had the game stutter on me once.
It's weird for that
gameplay, but
are we in FMV mode right now, or is this in engine?
I don't know.
Because it's really weird for an FMV to tank the frame rate, and it looks a little FMV right now. But
I think it is an FMV that's like based off of the cutscenes. There are in-engine cutscenes. Like sometimes the game will have trouble when it's like showing off a boss in a cutscene and then like fading back to the camera view. But it's never had issues with me when I was actually playing the game, which is the most important part.
If I were like watching this off the actual console, I'd probably be able to tell the difference between a pre-rendered video and an in-engine cutscene, but that comes down to like video clarity on my monitor. I can't really see that in this video right now, so...
Yeah, the characters definitely have a shinier look to them in the
I'll tell you what, though, if the cutscenes are actually having problems on the Switch, it might be that they started development of this game with the other consoles in mind, and the timed Switch exclusive came along later.
Yeah, I was. It's surprising though that this game got put on the Switch to begin with, though, because like when they revealed this at E3, and I remember being like astonished that a remake of a cult classic like this kind of came and went with as little fanfare as it did. Like this was shadow dropped the day the March Nintendo Direct came out, and I was kind of expecting something a bit bigger because Panzer Dragoon isn't like, this is a beloved Saturn game, so I kind of expected a little bit more. I don't know.
I understand the business logic of it, because it's a cult classic, as you said, but it was more successful in Japan than in the West, correct? So the portable system, well, portability in itself makes a system more appealing to the Japanese, and it's also a system where a little rail shooter game of this nature would do better in the West than, say, the PS4 or, God forbid, the Xbox One, which caters mostly to the Call of Duty crowd more than anything. So, thinking about it, it makes sense for the game to debut here.
Yeah.
For both regions, really.
I will say that this makes a fantastic portable game, though, because since the game's pretty short, you can do a run in about an hour if you're good at the game, which makes it...
Yeah, this is only a 4-part playthrough.
Yeah, so it's really good for that kind of... I can beat it on a bus ride kind of experience.
And this is the thing that sets Panzer Dragoon apart from like Star Fox, the ability to aim to the side and behind you as you fly around. I haven't played the original Panzer Dragoon or the remake yet. What I've played is Panzer Dragoon Orta on the Xbox 360, which is actually, it's an original Xbox game, but it's digitally available on the Xbox 360. And it's a really fun game. This looks quite a bit different than that, obviously, but it's really addictive once you get into it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it doesn't. So the basic idea is pretty similar to something like Star Fox. In terms of like the moment-to-moment gameplay, it's more about like locking on to stuff by passing the cursor over, which I think is. I'm trying to think of it. Was it like the plane levels in the original Sonic Adventure?
Yeah, they did that.
Exact same control scheme.
Sky Chase.
Yeah,
although a hell of a lot less refined than this, I'll say.
Yeah, it's a lot less jittery than that game. But yeah, so the big thing is that you can churn the camera, which gets pretty intense later on, and it also just allows you to get a better look at the world. And I mean, granted, yes, I know that a lot of people did have issues with how the game looks, but I do really love the art direction and the scenery that they went with in this game. It's striking to see the fantasy landscapes in kind of a game like this, because many games don't really give you the chance to look at a world through this angle. Like, I mean, there are plenty of fantasy steampunk settings in video games, but you usually don't get this kind of sweeping view of the landscape in them very often. And so while it's not technically impressive, I still think that the game is pretty to look at if you don't mind the rough edges. You know?
Yeah,
certainly.
the only kind of counterpoint to that is a lot of these games take place in space kind of for a reason, in that even with the pretty environments, that means it can kind of be hard to spot what's what.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Because it's like, oh, is that a plant or is that like a rock? I don't know. Whereas in space, if it's not black, you can assume it's a ship or something.
Yeah, that is true. Sometimes that is a nitpick you can have with this game, is that sometimes it's hard to see what's coming at you until it's too late. Most of the time, it's not that bad. Level 4, it's an issue, but we'll get to that in a later part. And there was also that weird graphical glitch that happened in the top left of the screen where it just blinked for a couple seconds, but whatever. It's just really a fun and addictive game that what I really like about it is that it tests your reaction time in a way that I don't feel punishes you too badly if you're not super familiar with the stage layout, because a lot of real shooters, this is more so, especially ones that go for the kind of very strict arcade feel that this one's going for, can sometimes fall into the trap of making you have to memorize stuff in order to win, as opposed to just being able to react. And aside from like a few levels in this game, playing on normal difficulty, I didn't really have trouble feeling like I was being blindsided. I felt like I could react to stuff fairly well and not feel like, oh, there was no way I could have avoided that or have known that.
Yeah. A lot of the conventions that this genre adheres to a lot of the time are literally arcade conventions where the game is supposed to dick you over and make you spend more coins.
Yeah. It has a feeling a lot like a Time Crisis or a similar kind
House of the Dead.
Yeah, House of the Dead or something like that, which Time Crisis was Capcom, I believe, but House of the Dead
was Sega.
And Sega's done a couple of different rail shooters like that. Ghost Squad was one that they made, which is
wasn't the Die Hard game in Japan also a rail shooter?
Maybe. But Sega's really good at these kinds of games.
They make really good arcade games, which is why they're so successful in Japan with those.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's not even just like Panzer Dragoon or like Ghost Squad, House of the Dead, Super Monkey Ball. Like, I honestly think that Sega is probably at their best when they're making something that's meant to be short and addictive. And the fun factor makes up for maybe a potential slight drop in depth or complexity.
For the most part, you're right. I mean, there are outliers, like the Yakuza series, of course, is the big outlier, like the biggest of the bunch. But then again, those games are also full of Club Sega arcades with actual Sega arcade machines that you can play games on. So they know their strengths.
Yeah, it's. I think that they're really good at those kinds of games, though, and it's a shame that more don't come out, because and we're gonna get back to Panzer Dragoon here. I think the only thing about this game that I think might be hard for people to swallow is, even though it is already a budget title, it's like $25, and for a game that people might only be playing for a few hours, and that's if they play it a couple of times, a lot of people feel like it's not worth their money to get a game like that, So,
yeah.
And I mean, I didn't feel like I was ripped off. I felt like I played through the game like 6 or 7 times at this point, and I've had a lot of fun each time. Like, I felt like I wanted to get good enough to beat the hard mode.
It's asking too much price-wise for someone to try on a whim. Is more the thing.
Like, not everyone's as dedicated to playing games as we are, so for most people that's a little steep.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it'll go on sale eventually, and if it ever is $10 or less, I absolutely recommend picking it up. But I feel like there has been a big Star Fox shaped hole in people's hearts because
Nintendo doesn't like Star Fox anymore.
Well, I mean, also, well, I'll get into this next time, but Star Fox is a hard game to make, so I'll continue that line of thought next time when we return to Panzer Dragoon, the remake.